The Martians, who we meet near the beginning of C.M. Kozeman's All Tomorrows, are the descendants of the first colonists from Earth to land on Mars. In the All Tomorrows universe, or the Tomorrowverse as it's sometimes referred to as, the first people to set foot on Mars were not astronauts. Instead of sending people to the Red Planet and having them terraform this desolate world once they'd arrived, Earth scientists, starting in the 2100s or the 2200s, began a series of atmospheric bombardments. This was done by sending enormous quantities of Earth-borne microbes to Mars, possibly inside of containers which were transported by self-piloting fusion rockets, which would automatically open once they had reached their destination. It took several centuries for this cycle to create a world that could be inhabited by humans, and after a few hundred years the Earth scientists who had inherited this ambitious project used an unknown technology to alter the trajectory of cometary fragments. These large fragments, made up of ice, would then collide with the surface of Mars and eventually melt to create oceans and other large water bodies. Once this had been accomplished, plants and animals were sent to Mars to further replicate the Earth's ecology. After possibly another couple of hundred years, likely somewhere around the 27th century, humans finally began to leave Earth for Mars. And so, upon arrival, the children who had been brought to Mars by their parents who were looking for new opportunities would run out of the ship that had brought them to Mars filled with wonder and excitement. When their feet touched the newly created biosynthetic grass, these children would officially become the first humans to set foot on another planet. After a few hundred more years, heading into the 30th century, the people of Mars had diverged quite a bit from their Earth-based cousins. The gravity on Mars wasn't as strong as on Earth, and so the people had grown much taller, developing spindly, wiry frames. It is also mentioned that some genetic engineering had taken place too, possibly to modify themselves in such a way to make life in a somewhat unnatural environment easier on them. They had only been on Mars for a few hundred years, and it could be that the human body needed some further adjustments to make life physically comfortable here. As can be seen in the image from this chapter in the book, we are presented with a young male Martian who seems to be somewhere between his late teens and early 30s. He is still very much human, but due to the low gravity that is responsible for his, by Earth standards, extreme height, he also has elongated angular features and a thin face. Put simply, the Martians look like stretched out versions of the people of Earth. He would likely identify as simply Martian, and would probably be a mix of various ethnicities that originated from Earth, who have all interbred over the preceding centuries. It is from this that parallels are drawn in the book between these new Martians and the people of the present-day United States of America. As the USA eventually developed its own cultural identity and broke away from Great Britain, so too did the people of Mars wish to forge their own path, without having to answer to the Earth-based global government which had a tight stranglehold on Mars and would reap the rewards of the Martians' hard work. It is because of this that they are referred to as the Martian Americans in this section of the book. The Martians were driven, hard-working and intelligent people, by this point more than capable of looking after their own affairs. Earth needed Mars, far more than Mars needed Earth. The culture on Mars by this point had become very anti-Earth. The old planet was now seen as being a drain on their newly created world, which was making great strides in all areas while Earth's society seemed to stagnate, seeming to have achieved all that it could. Sending humans to another planet was the end goal for Earth, and it had done this, but it seemed to the Martians that Earth didn't know when to call it quits and hand things over to a younger, more energetic inheritor. Earth had become a splendorous place at this point in time, a fantastic place to live no matter which country you were in, but much of its wealth had been siphoned from Mars. It was inevitable that the Martians would get sick of this eventually. Somewhere around the 31st century, Mars had had enough, and Earth was virtually cut off. Non-essential trade and travel between Earth and Mars was made illegal, and only in a few very special circumstances were people allowed to travel between the two. Only essential goods and personnel were allowed in and out of the Martian borders high up in the clouds. This was great news for Mars, as it could now keep its self-generated wealth to itself. It was terrible news for Earth, and meant that most people lost up to 3/4 of their annual income. War was inevitable. Earth declared war on Mars, and this interstellar conflict would become the bloodiest, most violently destructive war in human history so far. Enormous war machines were used by the two planets against each other, which were capable of performing the most infinitesimal calculations with regards to when and where to strike their enemy. At one point, the Mars moon Phobos was obliterated, and meteorite hail rained down on Mars, killing an untold number of its citizens. They retaliated by causing a polar impact on Earth, which killed billions of people. The Earth people and the Martians eventually realized that what they were doing was frankly idiotic. They ended the war and vowed to take steps to make sure that such a catastrophic event would never happen again. The people of Mars were now more advanced in every way than the people of Earth, possessing technologies that could only have been created by highly driven, dynamic Martians. But Earth still had its ancient wisdom and, as much as it may have pained the Martians to admit it, Earth was their ancestral home. Without Earth, there would have been no Mars, or no Mars civilization anyway. After centuries of tensions, hatred, and an uneasy alliance constantly on the verge of breaking, the two planets finally came together and made peace. But the people of Earth and Mars knew that, despite their newfound love for one another, true unification would never be possible between them, as, over the centuries, they had grown to become extremely different to one another in their appearance, attitudes, ideas, cultures, and ways of life. While they had a new respect for one another, they knew that the only way for the human race to truly progress was for a new kind of human to be created. Mars had become highly adept at genetic engineering, and Earth had made a great many advances in this field too. With their combined technologies and knowledge, the two planets' brightest minds got to work on a new and ambitious project which would, hopefully, ensure the survival of their species: the creation of the Star People. After the Star People had come into being, Mars isn't mentioned again in the book. The Star People went off to colonize Venus, Saturn, and many asteroids before moving on to planets beyond our solar system. They had left Earth and Mars behind, and what happened to Mars is unknown. It could be that after the creation of the Star People, Mars simply kept to itself after that and only really engaged with Earth. They knew that, despite their incredible accomplishments in the sciences and all other fields, that it was only a matter of time before it was made obsolete by what the Star People were capable of. Perhaps the Martians felt that their duty to humankind was not to save it themselves, but to create those who would. Maybe Earth felt the same way. They had met their destiny in producing the next step in human evolution within laboratories. They had accomplished their mission. They would let the Star People take over and had passed the torch to them, for they were now responsible for carrying the human race forward. Mars would then continue to work on its own problems alongside Earth, the two planets now only associating with each other, not wanting to slow down the Star People or get in their way. Mars and Earth would spend the remainders of their existences as peaceful, wise, and enlightened civilizations, no longer trying to colonize other planets, no longer engaging in senseless wars. They had reached the point where they knew that it was best for them to stay put on their own two worlds and not venture any further. And when their time finally came, they would embrace it with open arms, as even though they were about to meet their end, their species' future, at least for a time, was secure. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe to be notified of future uploads. And also don't forget to check out the merch store, which is now live. The link is in the description. This has been Beware the Q, and I'll see you in the next video.